Welcome, everyone, to Buddhist Center. My name is Jeff Allen, and we are so fortunate once again to be looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's Source of All My Good, sometimes translated as the foundation of all good qualities, begging for a mountain of blessings. And as we know, this text encompasses everything necessary for anyone to start from wherever they are at, to go from that place spiritually to a place where they are perfect, or we're perfect. And that's a really amazing statement to make about a very short poem. But when we start to study this short poem and we study the greater texts of Lama Tsongkhapa, the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and his incredible works on Chandrakirti and Nagarjuna and the Abhisama Alamkara, we start to see how each and every one of these stanzas really does relate to everything we need to know to go from where I'm at personally, which is very, trying to get into the small scope, to a practitioner who realizes the completion stage of highest yoga tantra. And all of those things seem so far away, but they seem so feasible because we have unerring instructions. We have nothing that's been left out. And if you aren't satisfied with partial instructions, you will be able to, pull all of the nectar out of each and every one of those stanzas and find all of the teachings for beings of small, medium, and great capacity in there, which encompass everything. It encompasses the way we get a good next life. It shows how we can have an abiding nirvana and get rid of the afflictive obstructions and have the realization of a hero or a solitary realize our arhat. And it shows us how to get rid of not only the afflictive obstructions, but the obstructions to omniscience and achieve the complete state of Buddhahood by relying on the teachings for beings of great capacity. And we're so fortunate that the Dharma that we're meeting with in this lifetime with this precious human basis isn't just a Dharma that will show us how to achieve just a personal liberation. It's a Dharma which will show us how to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings and really fulfill not only all of our needs, because a personal liberation doesn't even fulfill all of our needs because we still have obstructions to omniscience, but we're able to fulfill all sentient beings' needs because we become their reliable guide, and we become one of those only reliable guides in the universe. And those are those beings that are fully awakened, who have achieved the state of perfection, who have achieved the state of complete perfection of wisdom, love, and compassion, skillful means, and power. And it's amazing that we have those reliable guides in our world today to be able to show us what we need to do. Before we get started, though, let's get into a meditation posture that will allow us to calm our minds down, to get into a more reasonable place so that we can achieve a true understanding of these teachings, so we can try to get rid of the faults of the three pots of having an upside down pot where we don't hear anything, or having a leaky pot where we're not paying enough attention and all the information's leaking out, or having a contaminated pot where we have all these ideas in our mind and we're not really paying attention to the teaching because we have preconceived notions and we don't have an open mind. So hopefully we can get our minds calm enough, get to a point where we can really achieve the wisdom arisen from hearing, analysis, and meditation, because without those wisdoms, and specifically the wisdom realizing emptiness, we won't be able to cut the root of cyclic existence, because the liberating paths are only wisdom paths, and the ripening paths depend on whether we are following a medium scope that will ripen us into an abiding nirvana, and if we just have renunciation and desire to achieve liberation for ourselves alone. Or if we have a ripening path of bodhicitta that mixes with that wisdom, then we'll be able to achieve complete Buddhahood and dependence upon that ripening path of renunciation and bodhicitta, coupled with the wisdom realizing emptiness. That union of method and wisdom that we know is so necessary. So let's get into the 7-point Vairakana posture. We've gone over this many times, not going to go over the posture. Make sure your back's straight. Vertebrae like a stack of coins. Very, very important. The key point. I always hear the great shamatha masters of the day these days say that that's the one thing you don't want to mess up. is the back straight seems to be a very, very important detail. So 7-point Vairocana posture, and let's begin breathing in and out through our nose the way that we always do to get our minds to a calm place where they aren't scattering all over the place and where they aren't sleepy, where it's so clear and so focused so that we can hear things in a complete way so that when we go to analyze them, we know we're analyzing the totality of everything that we're supposed to. So let's get into that posture, and we begin breathing in and out through our nose, filling our lungs and our diaphragm all the way to the top of the breath, turning the breath around in a very natural fashion, not breathing in too quickly, not breathing out too quickly, etc. Just doing it in a very natural fashion. Breathing in, filling the lungs and the diaphragm, turning around the breath and exhaling, and then counting 1. We're also going to have the front generation image of Buddha Shakyamuni in the space in front of us, about a full body prostration length away. Imagine it about eye height, size of your thumb, maybe 2 inches or so. Beautiful, radiant, three-dimensional. Buddha Shakyamuni's behind my head here. Just imagine that image right in front of you. Like I said recently, a full prostration length away. And you can imagine the merit field and everything in that way. So when you're doing visualizations, you can actually feel that it's a physical presence in front of you that you're making physical prostrations to, and it makes all of your visualizations, and they're more realistic. They have just more potency to them. So we have the front generation aspect of Buddha Shakyamuni in that space in front of us, about the size of our thumb, and we'll begin breathing in and out and the counting. And remember, our focal object is only breathing in, filling the lungs and the diaphragm, and breathing out through our nose, and counting on the back end of the breath and the image of Buddha Shakyamuni while we're doing this. We shouldn't be thinking of anything else. If we start to think about anything else, our mindfulness, which is not forgetting the object of observation, not forgetting the instructions, our mindfulness brings us back because the spy in our mind has said, hey, you've fallen off the focal object. It's time for mindfulness to grab the focal object back. And you've told your mind what to do tonight, and your mind has been told to only meditate on the focal object of the breathing in and out, and the counting, and the Buddha Shakyamuni in the front generation. So let's do that for a moment. We're also fortunate to be able to focus on such a holy being, recognizing that we too will achieve these same realizations that Buddha Shakyamuni has. We will get rid of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience that we currently have within our mind that are sullying it, but are not part of its nature. They are adventitious defilements that can be removed, just like Buddha Shakyamuni removed his adventitious defilements. Those stains of our mind, which are not the nature of our mind, mind is naturally pure in the essence of neither this or that. Our mind is empty of inherent existence and has the potential to transform into full maturity because of the emptiness of inherent existence. We can mature our mind through the stages of the path. We can realize the teachings shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity, and the teachings for beings of great capacity, because we have this mental consciousness that can realize them, and we have this human basis with all of the qualities necessary to transform into that pure state. We possess a mind that's so intelligent. We have the Dharma in our world, the Dharma in our lives. We've met with holy gurus. We have holy teachers in the world right now. We're so fortunate to be able to move forward through the path because of our kind gurus. We're so fortunate the Buddha Shakyamuni was so kind and came into this world to show us how to be free from all of our suffering, how to achieve a complete state of bliss. We're so fortunate. Rejoice in the fact that you're here tonight. Think about how many billions of people are not here tonight, are not anywhere listening to the Holy Dharma, listening to the only truth, the only thing that will allow one to get rid of all of the afflictions, get rid of the origin of suffering, the only truth. Buddha Shakyamuni alone is the one who taught the Four Noble Truths, and it's for that reason he is the reliable refuge. Buddha Shakyamuni has shown us how to achieve a freedom from the truth of suffering that he presented so clearly by getting rid of the origin of suffering, which is our grasping at things as being objectively existent. We believe that the self of person and phenomena has some sort of true nature, objective reality that's findable. But when we look for it, when we try to find this self that inherently exists, we can't find it, and we see that it's merely a label that's designated upon a collection. It comes into power through labeling. And that the Buddha said that the lack of wisdom in relation to this, the grasping at things as having some identifiable, objective, intrinsic reality, is what causes our inappropriate attention to occur. And then from that inappropriate attention, the afflictions arise, contaminated karmas arise, and then the truth of suffering occurs over and over and over again. The pervasive compounded suffering forces us into a set of contaminated aggregates where we have to experience among the various types of suffering and at least be forced into another rebirth in our future. But the Buddha stated we can end all of this by relying on a path. Because if we get rid of the cause of a result, the result doesn't occur. And that the cause of our suffering, this ignorance that grasps at the I and phenomena as being truly established, can be combated with a wisdom that recognizes the fact that things are not inherently existent. All phenomena lack true establishment. All phenomena conventionally, subjectively only exist, but have no ultimate existence. There's no ultimate findable reality. There's merely a label that brings these things into being. This wisdom combats that ignorance. And when there's enough wisdom fighting the ignorance is no more, and we can achieve a state of cessation. We're so fortunate that we have these instructions in our lives. Feel so, so blessed. Now imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni, who's been so kind to us, now goes from the static position that we were imagining him in while we were doing focal object focused meditation, and explodes into the entire merit field. Now imagine that all of the gurus, Buddhas, and bodhisattvas are in the space in front of you, leaving out none. Any holy beings that you consider holy, have them in the space in front of you. Imagine Kensur Geshe Wandak, imagine His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe Lobsang Gompo, Ken Rinpoche Genjatso, Dema Locho Rinpoche, remembering Geshe Dorje Damdu, and Umzala Geshe Aga, and Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladrin La. All of the holy monks and nuns are in the space in front of you, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Anyone you consider to be a holy being. Now imagine all of the beings of the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya, to Asanga and Basubandhu and Dharmakirti and Dignaga and Vimuktasena and Haribhadra and Gunaprabha and Shakyaprabha, all those holy beings that taught us the grounds and paths and logic and reasoning and all about ethics, those holy, holy beings in the extensive deeds lineage. Now imagine the beings of the profound view lineage, that holy lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri to Nagarjuna, and Buddhapalita and Aryadeva and Shantideva and Chandrakirti and Baba Vega and Chandrashita, all of those beings of the Madhyamaka lineage, that profound view lineage that shows us the nature of reality in a complete way, that holy lineage passed down from Manjushri to Nagarjuna, And then Nagarjuna elucidated the path of Madhyamika in the final way according to the consequence school. Imagine those holy beings in the space in front of you. Imagine Salimpa, Lama Atisha's teacher of bodhicitta. Imagine Lama Atisha, imagining Dron Tompa and the three Kadampa lineages. Imagine all the holy beings of the Nyingma, Sakya, Kaju, and Galup order. Imagining Padmasambhava and the Karmapa, and imagining Sakya Pandita, Sangya Kunga Nimpo, Sakya Kunga Nimpo, and Lama Tsongkhapa, and Kirtap and Jelsop imagining them in the space in front of you alive, imagining they're debating and they're teaching Dharma and they're expounding emptiness and grounds and paths and logic and the Vinaya. Imagine all these holy beings are teaching the three baskets of the Vinaya basket, the Sutra basket, and the Abhidharma basket. Imagine this is all these holy beings are in the space in front of you. Imagine that the highest Yoga Tantra deities, Yogic Tantra deities, Performance Tantra deities, and Action Tantra deities are all there. All those holy beings in the space in front of you. Kala Chakra, Guhya Samaja, Chakra Sambhava, Yamantaka, all these holy beings. The three wrathful protectors. Imagine this, all of these beings. Imagining Haryagriva, Vachapani, Garuda, all these holy beings. Imagining Chenrezi and Manjushri, every holy being you can imagine. The 35 Buddhas, all the protector deities, Palden Lama, Mahakala. Imagining all these deities in the space in front of you, as many as you can possibly imagine, and not just the names that I said, because there are so many incredible beings that we're so connected to, that have blessed us with their teachings, that I've left out. So just imagining all of the ones you can. Now, start to think about other sentient beings than yourself. You recognize that you want to be free from the 8 types of suffering, the 6 types of suffering, and the 3 types of suffering. You want to be free from the origin of suffering. You want to completely get rid of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience, because you want to become a Buddha and recognize that all sentient beings are equally important. You recognize that you yourself, when you feel pain, it hurts. And when other sentient beings feel pain, it hurts so badly. And when they're happy, they feel so good. And when you're happy, you feel so good. And their happiness and freedom from suffering is as equally as important as yours. You desire to be free from all of these types of suffering. And they equally need to be as well. So you start to think about this and recognize that there is no inherently existent I or other. It's all designated in relation to one another. And when one other thinks of me, they think they are I and I am other. And we start to let the labels that we have start to disintegrate, that cause us to grasp at this I as being truly established, and then we cherish ourselves so much, and we think that we're so much more important than everyone else. And when we use logic and reasoning, we see that everyone's equally important, that everyone has Buddha nature, everyone will become a Buddha, everyone will remove the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience and be the most reliable guide in the universe. You may become a reliable guide before me. All sentient beings are equally important. Cherishing myself has always led me to suffering. It's such a closed way to think. I always feel so small from a mental perspective when I'm being selfish and I'm only thinking about myself. When I start to think about others' needs and I start to feel love and I start to look at others with love, my mind opens up and blossoms like the lotus. We see that cherishing others is so much more potent than cherishing ourselves, and we see that we become gems of the world when we cherish others. We see His Holiness the Dalai Lama cherishing others every step he takes and looking into the eyes of all sentient beings with that love and compassion that you see. It's almost tangible. You almost feel it. And why does everyone revere His Holiness so much? Because he has this attitude of cherishing others more than himself. Buddha cherished others more than himself and learned that that was the key to mix with wisdom to having bliss, infinite happiness, and complete fearlessness and reliability. So we see that cherishing others is so much better in terms of our mental disposition. And we see that when we cherish ourselves and we're so selfish, that all it does is leads to us being alone and sad. Start to think about how wonderful it would be if we could take on the suffering of others, because we know if we cherish others, that this is the way we can become a gem of the world, and we start to think, how could we cherish others? And we wish we could take on their suffering and give them happiness. We recognize how important these beings are for our happiness. And if I want to fulfill all of my needs, I depend upon you. I can't become a Buddha without you. It's in dependence upon other sentient beings that I can develop love, compassion, and generate the mind that aspires to enlightenment, that opens the door to the Mahayana and allows me to get rid of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. So if I want to achieve fearlessness and I want to achieve bliss, it's going to be necessary for me to put your needs before my own. All beings have been so kind to us. We start to think about the incredible interdependence we have with all sentient beings, even sentient beings who for generations haven't been alive. Because they were in this world, we are now able to experience various forms of happiness in relation to material objects and so forth. The food that we eat comes from sometimes generations of farmers and fields and planting, and so much hard work that went into me being able to eat a simple tomato, or being able to hold a cup in my hand that maybe was shipped around the world to various ports and trucks and delivery people and stores, and then maybe it didn't sell at the one store, and then maybe it was moved to a cheaper store. Just imagine how many sentient beings were involved in getting me my cup. I depend on everyone. Because I have this feeling that's now brewing inside of me, I start to say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to bring sentient beings to a place where they have happiness and the causes of happiness, and they're free from suffering and the causes of suffering. I don't want suffering. I don't like the position that I'm in. And I've now recognized that I want them out of the position that I want out of. I'm going to bring them to a state of happiness where there's causes only of happiness, and a state that's free from suffering where there's no causes of suffering. And then we recognize that we can't do that we are stuck in cyclic existence. We currently aren't reliable guides. We currently can't even count the number of sentient beings that there are, so we're so handicapped in relation to our ability to help. And that the only being that we have found who presents the truth, the only being who alone taught the Four Noble Truths, taught us how to get rid of the origin of suffering, is the Buddha. So I recognize that if I want to help all sentient beings, and if I want to be able to bring them to the place that I want to go to, I have to become someone who's gotten there. Because the Buddha is the one who's gotten there, and that's why he's such a reliable guide. He or she is such a reliable guide. Because they've already taken the journey and know all the pitfalls, know all the paths, know exactly how to get to that destination, whereas I do not. So I could try to take sentient beings by the hand, but who knows where I would lead them. Because I have this grasping at I as being truly established. So therefore, from that grasping that's so strong, I cherish myself so greatly that I just disregard your needs. And then at the, even more subtle level, if I start to get better, I'll just be oblivious to your needs. And that's what happens when we achieve just an abiding nirvana of a hearer solitary realizer. We remain there just in peace, in our own individual nirvana, oblivious to all sentient beings' needs. May I never, ever have those kind of pathways cross my minds, and always enter the Mahayana. And I recognize, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. May I become that reliable guide that I go for refuge to. I go for refuge to the Buddha, who has perfect wisdom, has perfect compassion. That's who I go for refuge to. The Buddha has the excellent qualities of body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities, and can emanate a body for each single sentient being if you are a receptacle to be able to be helped with that kind of wisdom and knowledge. So the Buddhas are always operating to try to help us at whatever level we're at, even if it's to be an animal that runs across the road, so we put on our brakes and abstain from killing. So we need to start to see our universe so much bigger and recognize that's the kind of reliable guide I want to be. I want to be a being who could see the mind of every single sentient being and know what each and every one of those beings need in order to have fearlessness and infinite happiness. May I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Now we recognize that we're here tonight. We're at a teaching. We're listening to a teaching that Lama Tsongkhapa gave that includes all of the stages of the path to enlightenment. So this is what will help me to be able to achieve the state of Buddhahood. And all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are so pleased that we're here tonight and that we're actually engaging in something that will cause us happiness. Because usually we engage in things that just bring about more suffering, and we turn like buckets on a water wheel, as Chandrakirti says, into more cyclic existence, into more cyclic existence, into more cyclic existence. So I recognize that I'm here tonight to be able to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And the only thing that I can do for sentient beings now is to try to lead them to reliable guides. So now imagine that you have an infinite number of hands and you grab all sentient beings, hell beings, hungry ghost beings, animals, all the humans, all the demigods and all the gods. Imagine you bring every single being here who has any remaining, even obstruction to omniscience. Imagine you even bring the hearers and solitary realizers out of their abiding nirvana and whisper in their ear, you must practice the Mahayana path and become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings because your needs aren't complete. And here tonight we're learning how to complete your needs. So bring all the sentient beings here and imagine that you love them all without bias and you're doing the only thing that you can for them right now. It's bringing them to the place where you know the answer is. So now imagine that all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are so full of bliss because now all sentient beings are here. Their goal is for all sentient beings to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering and to have happiness and the causes of happiness. And this is the medicine that cures the illness of unhappiness and blisslessness. So now the Gurus and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas start to erupt with bliss. Imagine white light rays, red light rays, and blue light rays and nectars start to erupt and kind of boil out of the merit field in front of you. Just imagine you start to see an eruption. Imagine yourself and all sentient beings have a white Om on your crown signifying your body, a red Ah at your throat signifying your speech, a blue Hum at your heart signifying your mind. Now imagine that from this eruption of bliss that's occurring in front of you, this earthquake of bliss occurring in front of you in the merit field, imagine that white light rays and nectars start to shower down on you and all sentient beings and transform into white Oms, dissolve into the white Om at your crown and all sentient beings' crown, and purify your body. Now imagine that red light rays and nectars shower down and rain on you and all sentient beings, transform into red Ahs, dissolve into the red Ah at your throat, and then purify yours and red Ah at your throat and all sentient beings' throat, and purifying all of yours and all sentient beings' speech. Now imagine that blue light rays and nectars shower down on you and all sentient beings, transforming into blue Hums, dissolving into the Hum at your heart and all sentient beings' heart, and purifying your mind. Now imagine that these white, red, and blue light rays and nectars have transformed you through perfect method, wisdom, and purification. And imagine that you and all sentient beings for a moment abide in the state that everyone will be in when they achieve the perfection of Buddhahood. Okay, now we'll recite the Heart Sutra in English. How amazing it is that we could imagine ourselves as a fully enlightened being. How many sentient beings in this whole universe could ever imagine themselves as a fully enlightened being? And you just did. Such a wonderful, wonderful aspiration to plant in your mind that this is the being that you know you can become and will become. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever not have confidence or feel demoralized because these teachings seem difficult or you don't understand it in their totality, because nothing becomes more difficult through familiarization. And you have a very intelligent mind that can transform, because of the emptiness of your mind, into a pure mind through the wisdom arisen from hearing analysis and meditation. So never underestimate your potential from where you sit at this very moment, and know that you will become that Buddha, because all sentient beings have Buddha nature. And don't ever think that you're the only one in the crowd that doesn't, because there is no sentient being that's findable. It doesn't have Buddha nature. Any being that has a mental consciousness has the ability to transform that mental consciousness, because the mental consciousness doesn't have any static, kind of permanent, unitary, independent kind of way of only being sullied. So the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge is the second turning of the wheel of Dharma of Buddha that Buddha gave. The first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, origin of suffering, cessation of suffering, and truth of path. But the Buddha didn't give a complete outlook of what selflessness meant at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. He only taught selflessness of person. If we look at it from the first turning stance, not interpreting it from the second turning stance, if we look at it from the first turning stance, we see that Buddha Shakyamuni did not negate the inherent existence of external phenomena, only the self. And then the refinement took place at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, once he had primed everybody enough for the ground-shaking information that he was giving the world. There's no, because there was such a view of Atman at the time, of just a self, of person, that was separate from the mind and body that would go from life to life. And there was such a heavy view, the Buddha started to, as the teachings shared in common with beings of small, medium, and great capacity do, they deal with the individual person at their scope from where they're at slowly. And the Buddha turned the wheel of Dharma, first teaching the Four Noble Truths and just talked about selflessness of person. And then the second turning of the wheel of Dharma of the Heart Sutra taught the selflessness of all, of person and all phenomena, and said that there was nothing that had inherent existence. The Four Noble Truths doesn't have an inherent existence. And there's nothing that has inherent existence. Emptiness is empty of inherent existence. So it is very important to understand these facts, that ultimate truth was empty, and that emptiness was empty, and that all phenomena were empty, and there's no findability of an objective reality or objective existence in any phenomena. Everything does exist, but only subjectively exists and comes into the being through the power of label. Now, one has to be able to posit existence still and not land in nihilism with that statement. And then one also, though, can't land on substantialism, where one adheres to this kind of pure, inherently existent thing. So there's a middle road of dependent origination and nominal designation, power of nominal designation that brings phenomena into existence. But there isn't findability of objective existence from the object's own side. And we talked about, the shoe that I put on my foot, my dog thinks is a toy. And I say shoe, dog thinks toy. Which is it? Well, the object doesn't have shoeness or toyness from its own side. It takes subjectivity to label it and bring it into being as this or that. But then that sounds very easy, but then when you start to try to figure out why different objects you decide are this or that, then that becomes difficult, because then if you don't have any objectivity in the object, there's no ness-ness there, chair-ness-ness there. Why am I choosing to call it a chair? And that's when you start to see if you can decipher what the emptiness is and isn't, what an object is empty of and is not. What's the object of negation? What are you saying is selfless? Okay, this phenomena doesn't have self. Well, what's the object of negation? It's not that there isn't phenomena. It's the way it's occurring to you that is in question. So we're not going to go any further than that, but then implicitly also all of the paths of Buddhism are contained within the Heart Sutra, because it's a summary of the 100,000 verse, 20,000 verse, 8,000 verse, a lot of other thousands of verses, Perfection of Wisdom sutras that are out there. So, and knowing that, let's read this. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain. Oh, and the most important thing to understand is that although the Buddha did not teach the absence of true existence of inherent existence of phenomena at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, And, the first turning of the wheel of Dharma is generally thought of as, being, the Hinayana teaching, the teaching, generally it's thought of in that kind of way. But the emptiness that's understood in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma is necessary to achieve abiding nirvana or complete Buddhahood. Aryadeva clears this up, and the great Indian pandits clarify this and show us that there's no partial view of the nature of reality that is going to allow you that will be a liberating path. There's no partial view. You have to have the understanding of the emptiness of the self, of person, the emptiness of the inherent existence of the self, of person and phenomena, in order to even achieve the Hinayana, here a solitary realizer, abiding nirvana. So the emptiness of the Madhyamika Prasangika school, the emptiness of the middle way consequence school, is necessary for the Nyentu and Rangel, for the hearers and the solitary realizers, even to achieve their liberation. So the emptiness that's found in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma at Rajagriha, at Vulture Peak Mountain, is the emptiness that's necessary for any practitioner who wants to achieve liberation. And when we look at what liberation is, we can look at Nagarjuna's precious garland and see that there's high status in certain goodness. And certain goodness is liberation and can be divided into the certain goodness of a hero solitary realizer, kind of arhatship, abiding nirvana, or the certain goodness of Buddhahood. But any of that certain goodness that isn't samsara, that isn't cyclic existence, can only be achieved through the Madhyamika Prasangika view of emptiness. And any view that falls short of that view will not be a liberating path, according to Aryadeva, Chandrakirti, etc. The only liberating paths are the path which sees emptiness in totality, sees the emptiness of self of person and self of phenomena. So if there's any kind of grasping still left at arisal from self or from other or from both or causelessly, if there's any kind of grasping in that kind of way, then you don't have the view. As Sakya Kunga Nimpo says in the Parting from the Four Attachments, if there is grasping, you don't have the view. So if there's any kind of grasping that's left at self of person or phenomena having objective existence, if you can't posit it as only being subjectively existent conventionally through the power of label, and then ultimately there's no findability, if you can't find that, there's still some grasping and you don't have the view. So this view in the Heart Sutra is the view one has to recognize. The view Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and Aryadeva and Buddhapalita and Shantideva, all of these masters realize and pronounce. It's that view and only that view which will cut the root of cyclic existence. And if you have renunciation, then that cutting will cause you to be in an abiding nirvana. But if you have renunciation and bodhicitta, that cutting will cause you to be a Buddha. So those are the stakes. Getting emptiness wrong means you're getting the whole liberating path wrong, and it will not cause you to achieve freedom. You will not have fearlessness. You will not be able to be free from the First Noble Truth. The 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, 3 sufferings will still be on your plate. You can meditate on, almost the right emptiness for 1,000,000 lifetimes, and only almost the right emptiness will get you to 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, 3 sufferings. Those are the stakes. That's why understanding what the Heart Sutra means, and we saw Jayan Gapi Lodru's commentary, Rinpoche so generously shared with us. The first Drepung Losaling textbook writer shared with us and clarified so many wrong views about this Heart Sutra for us, and showed us the 5 paths, and showed us it's not a tantric mantra in there, and there's no Heart Sutra initiation. Jayan Gapi Lodru was so kind to be able to interpret the Abhisama Alamkara in such a clean way, and Panchen Sanandrapa interpreting the Abhisama Alamkara in such a clean way that we now in our hearts have a little understanding of what the Heart Sutra means. Because of this lineage of blessings, this incredible lineage that we've been blessed to be part of. This lineage that comes down to us, that shows us what the grounds and paths mean in the Heart Sutra, passed down from Maitreya to Asanga and Basubandhu and Dharmakirti and Dignaga and Haribhadra and Vimuktasena and so forth, to be able to really understand what the grounds and paths are and so forth. And then Nagarjuna and Manjushri to Nagarjuna and Buddhapalita and Aryadeva and Chandrakirti and Shantideva being able to show us what the actual profound view of emptiness of this is. And we've been touched by all of these scholars because Jayangapi Lodru, Panchen Sonandrapa, Khensa Rinpoche have all been so kind to us. His Holiness the Dalai Lama makes sure we know the names of the Nalanda masters. Because the Nalanda masters who gave us this nectar to be able to cut the root of cyclic existence. Without the nectar of Madhyamika Prasangika, you will not achieve any liberation. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha monks and a great gathering of the Sangha Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind conscious dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way. Teyata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family. Thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita, just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Ngala jube ne jo tamba ne ngushe de ju ngai de do jen ju baba la mai bu shen si ne zung gandro zo la ja ze lo aga samara de chandara samara vega samara. Aga samara jajanara samara vedi ata on gate gate paragate parasangati buddhi zo baba gonjo sanji gaye de medio je lobo doji mebo doji shewa doji dragi baji medu beje danje je din korie zo geren jo jaje je wa da medu ne be jan andra wa da tumba jun jin bon zon zon joji taji de jan den da de le jo. Now we'll make a request for teaching, outer mandala offering. Imagine you're offering a perfect universe, with all sentient beings enjoying that perfect universe, and that all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are so blessed and pleased because it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing you're offering, and that everyone's happy. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas High, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. Je zon lama damba nye nan ye jogala yen le jun zen re ye da zam he lo ye zim ala za ye yu yi I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Gam Niratayami Sanje Jadan Jaje Jananda Janju Badu Danyi Jazuchi Dagi Chishe Jibe Zananji Dula Benji Sanje Dubarjo Sanje Jadan Zaji Jananda Janju Badu Danyi Jazuchi Dagi Chishe Jibe Zananji Dula Benji Sanje Dubarjo Sanje Jadan Zaji Jananda Janju Badu Danyi Jazuchi Dagi Chishe Jibe Zananji Dula Benji Sanje Dubarjo. If you are attached to this life, you are not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you are attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha, Gautama, I pay homage. May this teaching be heard and understood in the language of all sentient beings, as it says in the Sanjya Molong. Okay, here we are again. So good to see all of you. From Shanti Deva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, from chapter 5, verse number 56, we find some really beautiful instructions that I'd just like to read before we get started with the Yunten Shijurma conversation about the source of all my good by Lama Tsongkhapa, and with Pabongkha Rinpoche's commentary. And tonight we're going to look at the third Dalai Lama's Essence of Refined Gold to look at a section of it. But it says, I should not be disheartened by all the whims of the childish who are in discord with one another. I should know them to arise in their minds due to disturbing conceptions, and therefore be kind towards them. So I think this is really important for us to always remember that when we're, meeting with people and we're seeing, people argue with us and so forth, and so much anger in the world and war, we know that all of this is coming from disturbing conceptions, and we learn this in the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, that the origin of all suffering, the origin of everything, is the grasping at I and phenomena as being truly established. And in dependence upon that, like Nagarjuna says, then all of a sudden we have inappropriate attention, and then we have this afflictions arise, and then from the afflictions we have the contaminated karmas arise, and then we have this samsara, and then we have these behaviorally concordant things that happen with our previous karmas that we have. And then we have the grasping at I that gives rise to the potential for them all to happen. So whenever we encounter the world and we encounter other sentient beings, recognize that when they're struggling, they're only struggling for the same reason that we struggle. So I think it's so important to look at that. So let's take a look at the source of all my good. We know that Pabongkha Rinpoche divides it into 4 categories. First, the category of finding a teacher, developing faith and reverence, and how you serve them through thought and actions and so forth, and then how you increase your actual reverence for the Guru, who is the foundation of all your good. And we know that each one of these stanzas, Pabongkha Rinpoche shows us how to understand, to interpret, is once we get to the end of the meaning of that stanza, we say, before today, before this moment, I was moving the wrong way. Now I recognize that the foundation of all my good is my teacher. I realize I have to use this life of leisure and opportunity. I realize I have to practice the small, medium, and great scope. May I, from this moment onward, please be able to just do that. May I be able to just, stop screwing up, stop making a mess, and be able to start just moving forward with the ways that the Buddha has taught from this moment on. May the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas please bless me to be able to do this, because we really need the assistance of all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas, because we need teachers. We need those beings who could possibly intervene as an animal running in front of our car, so we abandon killing. And we need those beings to please be able to bless our minds to be able to move forward in our spiritual development. So we know that it starts with the Lama, it starts with the teacher, it starts with a holy being like Khensur Geshe Wandak somehow invading the mind of a crazed elephant mind like mine, and starting to make clarity out of a mess. And I see more and more clarity coming out of the mess as I practice year after year, decade after decade. And it's very slow movement, but there's movement nonetheless. And if there isn't movement in your spiritual practice, if you aren't noticing that these things that Tsongkhapa wrote and that Khensur Rinpoche taught you, and that His Holiness the Dalai Lama teaches us, and that the Profound View lineage teaches us, and the Extensive Deeds lineage teach us, or if you're a practitioner of Mahamudra and you're practicing all the teachings of Saraha and Matripa and Tilo and Naro and Marpa and Milarepa, if you've been doing that for a long time and trying to figure out what your mind looks like and it's not changing you, you need to adjust what you're doing, because these teachings should be maturing you, because we have Buddha nature that is maturing Buddha nature, and it only matures into perfection if you mature it. If you get unattached to this life and get unattached to future lives and then get unattached to nirvana. That's it. It's the only way. So we see the Pabongkha's first stanza, first category is the teacher. It says in Lama Tsongkhapa's text, the source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. I'm going to read up to where we are. Bless me first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. Again, the excellent life of leisures, the 8 leisures that we have. We know why Lama Tsongkhapa didn't write the 10 opportunities here. In Pabongkha Rinpoche's commentary, it's so clear that Lama Tsongkhapa knew, because Shakyamuni wasn't in the world, the 5 outer opportunities aren't really present. So Lama Tsongkhapa just posited that we have this life of leisure because we have this human basis. We're somewhere where the Dharma can get to us, and it's in this world. So we're so fortunate we don't have these wrong views that disallow us to even hear this and believe that it could be possible. So we're so fortunate, and this life is so valuable. We should really take its essence night and day. And then this next stanza, Pabongkha Rinpoche says, starts the section on number 2, what you do once you've found a Lama, how you practice. So the first category, Pabongkha says, is some advice to take essence of this life. Like, hey, you've got a good life you could do some really great stuff with. The Dharma's in this world. This is a good basis to practice from. You don't have all of these other bad bases. And in Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, we find a really good description of these 8 leisures. So I encourage you to read about these and how they pertain to lower realms, you as a human, and higher realms potentially. And you are free of those leisureless states. So I'll let you look into that. So really take its essence night and day. How would you do that? How would you take its essence night and day? You'd start to understand the small scope. So Pabongkha Rinpoche says now we get into the small scope where we learn how to be free from the lower realms of cyclic existence. How we start to get rid of attachment for this life. So it says in the departing from the 4 attachments, if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. Well, this is what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying now. The small scope starts at you becoming unattached to this life. Getting that, loosening that up. So you'd want to be free from the suffering of the hell, hungry ghost, and animal. And you learn about the 8 hot hells, 8 cold hells, the surrounding hells that you have to suffer, the suffering of the hungry ghosts of having these necks that are so coiled up in knots that they can't swallow the food that they want so bad, with holes in their mouth they can't get the food into, and stomachs as big as a mountain, and every time they get to a water it turns into a mirage. If you look into the Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, you'll find very good descriptions of the hells, hungry ghosts, and animals, and all of the higher realm deities' sufferings. You'll find very good descriptions, and you'll see that the lower realms are terrifying, and we see the sufferings of having to be enslaved when you're an animal, having to almost be a servant to others at all times. Or worry about being eaten by a bigger animal, and constantly living in fear and looking for somewhere to sleep where you don't feel like you're going to be eaten by another animal. And we can see these sufferings with our own eyes. And we know that when we look at the 3 roots and 9 reasons that death will come and nothing can stop it, life is always being subtracted from and never added to. And we don't have any time to practice Dharma. We don't know when we're going to die. Lifespan's not fixed in where we live. There's so many causes for deaths and not many for life. This body's super insignificant. We can't bring money and material things with us when we die. Our friends can't help. Our money can't help. This body eventually is the reason that we die. We get around 100 years out of it. And then we recognize that we pass on and are thrust into whatever we've been able to thrust ourselves from a aspiration and calmness of mind perspective into. And are you ready for that? Are you ready to die in 12 hours? Will you know what to do if you die, or if you know right now you're going to die in 12 hours? Will you be ready for that? Will you be okay? Will you be like Geshe Chikawa and say, I can die with no regrets? Or will you be terrified because you know what's next? And we'll read it. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. So previously, I was attached to getting the things of this life and doing all kinds of non-virtue in order to get all of those things, in order to be happy for this life. But now I know that the things of this life are really not worthy of me going to hell, hungry ghost, and animal realm for. They are not worthy, the things that I can create non-virtue for, of that. Because that non-virtue that I'm creating will cause me so much more suffering than the suffering of not even getting this thing that can't cause me happiness. So I recognize that I have to, abandon this attachment to this life and become a spiritual practitioner, because death will come, and what follows behind me? My virtue and my non-virtue. Virtue giving rise to happiness, non-virtue giving rise to suffering. Then, grant me then to ever be careful to stop the slightest wrongs of the many wrongs we do, and try and carry out each and every good of the many what we may. Obvious, right? You don't want to have suffering? Abandon non-virtue. What did the Buddha say in the Vinaya? Abandon evil, abandon non-virtue, engage in perfect virtues. Subdue your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. 4 lines, 1 stanza. This is the whole teaching that the Buddha gave. And you can see renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness in that 1 stanza. And that's how you become a Buddha. That's the teaching of the Buddha, how to become a Buddha. So then it says, abandon the non-virtue and carry out good here. Then it says, now we get, that was the small scope, which shows us how to get rid of the suffering of the lower realms of cyclic existence. Now we get to where we left off, the medium scope. Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and to recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teachings. So on Sundays, we're studying now. We're in the section in the Lamrim Chemo on the 10 non-virtues, and we've been going through them very, very specifically and seeing how you would create a full non-virtue, or a great degree or a medium degree or a small degree in relation to killing, stealing, adultery, etc. The 3 non-virtues of the body, 4 non-virtues of the speech, and the 3 non-virtues of the mind. So we see really, really clearly how we create our future sufferings by depending upon non-virtue, and how we create future happiness by engaging in the ethics, which abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities. So we see right here in the medium scope and the small scope, the medium scope, that ethics are indispensable. So what are we talking about? Why are they seemingly good things of this life? So in order to understand what these stanzas are talking about, we must understand the 4 Noble Truths. We have to start at the first Noble Truth. Dungyal Papi Dembao. This is the superior truth of suffering. We have to look at general suffering and specific suffering. Because how are we going to desire to emerge from something we don't have a clue what it is? If you don't know what you have to get out of or don't want, why would you even try to get out of it? Does it even make any sense? It couldn't possibly make sense if you aren't convinced that you have the truth of suffering, that you would want to get out of it. Because cyclic existence is too tasty. There's too much bait around. It's not possible. And we see this sentiment presented by the 3rd Dalai Lama in the Essence of Refined Gold. So there's a couple of, I'm going to read it, actually 2 parts of it. The first part kind of just talks about the various types of suffering, and then it gets into what we're going to need to do. So we're going to look at the 4 Noble Truths kind of in a general way, and you can see how you can interpret all the 4 Noble Truths through this 3rd Dalai Lama Essence of Refined Gold. And this is in the section on the lesser vehicle, Hinayana, I'm sorry, that's the language I was taught, the Hinayana realization of the here as solitary realizer section of the Essence of Refined Gold, which is dealing with the medium scope, the teachings for beings of medium capacity, which allow you to achieve an abiding nirvana. And everybody stop freaking out about these words. Why wouldn't it something that is only for yourself not be called lesser than something that's for everyone? I mean, it doesn't even make sense why there's controversy about this. If you're only seeking your own personal liberation and you're oblivious to everyone's needs, or you want to be the reliable guide to free every single sentient being from suffering in your heart so big, why wouldn't that be okay to be called great and lesser? So I think we can I just don't see the issue. And I understand it's insulting in some ways, but just, okay, well, look at why I'm saying it and see if you want to become a Mahayana practitioner and enter the Mahayana vehicle. Nagarjuna had no problem calling that vehicle that leads to an abiding nirvana a jail. So anyway, let us not ever miss any paths, but always be led by a Mahayana guru who shows us that we have to engage in all of the paths, but our motivation is to become a Buddha. Okay, 3rd Dalai Lama. A samsaric form is merely a vessel holding the suffering of pain, the suffering of transient pleasure, and the all-pervading suffering. And in cyclic existence, and in that cyclic existence is by very nature all-pervasive suffering. One never knows any joy or happiness not wrapped in and embraced by misery and frustration. In the realm of the asuras or anti-gods, the beings suffer constantly from fighting with and killing and wounding one another. Above that, in the realm of the desire gods, when the 5 signs of oncoming death manifest, the beings suffer more than hell realm beings. So the 3rd Dalai Lama is saying here, so let me just clarify what this means. When a desire realm god dies, they were beautiful and had flowers and everything. They're surrounded by beautiful maiden, women and men and beautiful gods, and everything's beautiful. And when they're about to pass away into their next life, they don't even know they're going to have. They think that's all they've got. They think they're gods forever. Everything starts to wilt. They start to smell. Their splendor fades, it says, and they're shunned by the gods. So in the teachings, probably in the Abhidharma and so forth, it talks about when the desire realm god dies, they start to stink. And all the gods don't want to see anything bad because they only like good things. So that you're left alone to die knowing, and you see you're going to probably go to hell. And it says, in your suffering you experience, because that change is so drastic, from the highest realm to the lowest realm, your mind is tormented. As their splendor fades and they are shunned by other gods, they know boundless mental anguish. Still higher in samsara are the gods of the realms of form and formlessness, and although they do not experience the suffering of immediate pain, those of the first three levels, so when we look at the form realm, there's 4 levels. The first three levels of, so the desire realm has the suffering of suffering, suffering of change, and the pervasive compounded suffering, all 3 sufferings. The form realm only has 2 sufferings in the first 3 levels, the suffering of change and pervasive compounded suffering. Once you get to the 3rd level of the form realm, once you get to the 4th level of the form realm, you no longer experience the suffering of change. You only have the pervasive compounded suffering. So the 4th level, concentration level of the form realm, and all 4 levels of the formless realm only have the pervasive compounded suffering. That suffering of being forced by your karma and afflictions, by the contaminated karmas, afflictions, and their seeds into a contaminated set of aggregates beyond your control. And the Buddha said, what? Lack of freedom is misery. You don't have any control in that. And a form, even the beings in the 4th level of the form realm and all 4 levels of the formless realm still will be thrust again by karma and afflictions into a rebirth, into a suffering rebirth. And they will probably then again have the suffering of change, the suffering of suffering, and pervasive compounded suffering to experience once again. So it says, those of the first 3 levels have the suffering of transient pleasure, and those of the 4th level and the formless levels must endure the all-pervasive suffering. So they're translating the suffering of change as the suffering of immediate pain, and the suffering of suffering as... the suffering of... let me fix that. The suffering of suffering as the suffering of immediate pain, and the suffering of change as the suffering of transient pleasure, and the pervasive compounded suffering is all pervasive suffering. So all of cyclic existence has the pervasive compounded suffering, and at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the first noble truth, the Buddha was really, really talking about the pervasive compounded suffering that keeps the circle turning over and over and over again. That keeps that beautiful image in the fangs of Yama, the Sipi Korlo, the wheel of life, going over and over and over again. And the 12 links of dependent origination just keep you going from lifetime to lifetime. You know, those 12 links that take 2 or 3 lifetimes to complete, that start with ignorance and then action, and then consciousness plants a seed, and you're off to the races. So we need to really look at these 3 types of suffering and understand that, all of cyclic existence has at least one of them, which is likened to an unrupted. So it says that the 4th level of the form realm and all 4 levels of the formless realms, they have to endure all pervasive suffering, which is likened to an unruptured boil. So then the 3rd Dalai Lama goes on to say, you should think over these general and specific imperfections of the various dimensions of samsaric existence, and then strive in every possible way to attain the state of nirvana or liberation from them all. It should be noted that such a state is not causeless or conditionless, and so one should train in the practices which bring about actual attainment of liberation, i.e. the practices of the 3 highest higher trainings: ethical discipline, concentration, and wisdom. Furthermore, as the higher trainings of concentration or wisdom depend and are based upon the higher training in ethical discipline, you should first train in it. And because discipline is easily broken when mindfulness and such forces degenerate, you should maintain clear thoughts firmly supported by mindfulness and clarity, and thus guard against all possible downfalls. What is mindfulness? Not forgetting what you're supposed to be doing, not forgetting the object. And what are we not forgetting? We're not forgetting we're supposed to engage in the ethics that abandons the 10 non-virtues. We're not forgetting that we need to abandon the negativities that we've said we'd abandon in the individual liberation vows. So in this scope, in the medium scope, we find the ethics of the individual liberation vows, the pratamoksha vows, the 7 lifetime vows of the 2 householder vow, male and female, the novice monk and nun vow, probationary nun vow, and the fully ordained vow of the monk and nun. We find the pratamoksha lifetime vows, and we see that is, whatever vows we hold, or, if we're just trying to abstain from the 10 non-virtuous activities, we're trying not to harm sentient beings, whatever we're trying to do, whatever we're, as good people, our mindfulness is remembering that's what we're supposed to be doing. So it says that, your mindfulness and clarity thus guard against all possible downfalls. If you ever breach your discipline, don't waste a moment, but immediately acknowledge your failing to yourself and resolve to proceed correctly in the future. Again, we talked about that. The quicker you can apply the 4 opponent powers, I know that some of you asked that question, can you, when you see you've done something, can you apply that 4 opponent power of regret, right away, and just start the process of, establishing the power of basis, of going for refuge and generating bodhicitta, establishing the power of regretting what you've done, the power of an antidote, doing some sort of, purification practice. We see there's 6 things that you can rely upon in terms of antidote found in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, or the Lamrim Chemo, or Namdru Lajong in liberation. You find the 6 antidotes in the 4 opponent powers and the power of antidote that you can use, reciting names, etc., power of emptiness, sutras, constructing image, making offerings, etc., recitation, doing the mantras and doing deity yoga and so forth. I think those are all 6, actually. So we see that we can apply the antidote and then making a commitment that we can actually realistically keep to not doing whatever we've done badly again. So if we just, if said we're abandoning gossip, and we know we're really bad at abandoning gossip, let's say, and we know we're going into a crowd of people, let's say, okay, I'm going to abandon gossip for 10 minutes. And if we keep that vow, it really is so holy and so virtuous. This is how you become a holy being. It's not by jumping from where you're at into highest yoga tantra. It's by saying, I will not gossip for 10 minutes. And then don't gossip for 10 minutes. Okay? If you breach your discipline, don't waste a moment. When a delusion such as anger, attachment, jealousy, and so forth arise, meditate upon its opponent, such as non-attachment, love, equanimity, etc. Be your own judge in practice, and don't fall short of your aims. Let nothing you think, say, or do contradict the advice of the spiritual master. And that was the greatest thing I think the Dalai Lama could ever say. Right there. Be your own judge in your practice. You can pretend, you can fool the world, but the mirror of the Dharma, you know your own mind. Like I was saying, others may not see your spiritual progress. You know your own mind. You're your own judge of your practice. The other day I was joking with Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladra, and I was like, I wonder what, because I'm sweeping in the morning early, doing 6 preparations sometimes. And I was, thinking, like, what do neighbors think? Like at, 4 or 5, whatever in the morning, whatever time, doesn't matter. You get up. I try to get up before it gets light out. That's what Rinpoche told me to do. And said, Lama Tsongkhapa, everyone says, get up before the sun rises when it's quiet and you can practice and your mind's most clear. And I was wondering, what would people think? They see someone sweeping and what is this person doing? This doesn't make any sense. And it says, you be the judge of your own practice. Who cares what they think? And Geshe Mala Ladran said, don't even worry about what others think if you are seriously practicing. I'm the only judge. I only know my own mind. I might just be sweeping because I want the neighbors to think, I might have told them I'm a spiritual practitioner. And I turn my lights on and sweep so they see me sweeping. You're the judge of your own mind. And it says when these things come up, attachment, when you have attachment come up, meditate on it. There's all the antidotes, right? Rinpoche gave us so many antidotes. He said, what did he say? Think about it for a second, and I wonder how many of you can just have it come up. That's why Rinpoche came here, so we wouldn't have leaky pots, so we wouldn't forget the instructions. I feel so fortunate to have this stuff being stamped in my mind. And sometimes I know I'm just going on and on and on and on, but these are just the words of Khensa Geshe Wandak that he went like this into my mind, and they stuck there. And I feel like I can't do anything but say them. When he said, what did he say about attachment? Meditate on ugliness, meditate on impurity, right? Meditate on the way things really are. Blood, pus, bones. Shantideva knew how to do that really, really well. And if you're a female, just apply it to the male body. If you're attached to that, meditate on the suffering of change, how all contaminated things. We look at the second, we look at the 4 seals, the second seal. All contaminated things are in the nature of suffering, right? So we get clarity and we start to, that lessens our attachment. If we have hatred, meditate on love. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. And if we have ignorance, what did Rinpoche always say? Meditate on dependent origination. And that dependent origination and meditation on emptiness would be the cure for all of the poisons. Remember? Remember he said that over and over again? I certainly do, because he said it over and over and over again to me. This stuff has been ingrained in my mind. So I wake up in the morning literally like I have a basis that's going to die. Like lightning hits me. And this isn't something I've always woken up with. But through the maturation, and this isn't something that then I day and night want to get out of cyclic existence. And now I'm saying I have renunciation. I don't have renunciation. But I see how my mind has changed enough to wake up in the morning and know I have to go practice first. Changed enough. And that if I could make it know that I have to go practice first every moment of my day, like what's next? Oh, practice. What's next? Practice? Because that's what Rinpoche did. Anyone who knew Khensa Geshe Wandak knew he was always somewhere practicing. I don't know if he was always on this earth when I'd look at him. I remember when I realized that, I walked into the room in 1999 to bring him a cup of tea, and he had his eyes wide open, and he looked and smiling, and I walked in front of him to offer him tea, and I didn't really talk about this when he was alive, except with close people, but I walked up to him to give him tea. And he didn't respond. And his eyes were wide open. And he didn't move. His eyes didn't focus another way when I moved or anything. And I said, Rinpoche, the Sujachu. And he was just in this blissful place with his eyes wide open. And then I left the room. And I came back in 15 minutes later to bring him tea. And I looked at him with this what just happened look in my eye. And I said, Rinpoche, I just came in the room to give you tea. And he just erupted in laughter and didn't say anything else. So it's just so amazing that we can become beings that day and night want to practice. Not because it constrains us or because we feel we give things up, because it's what we feel the lightest doing. And you saw Khensa Rinpoche weighing, I don't know how many, weighing 300 pounds, feeling when you're around him like the lightest being in the world. Being able to see, someone who at a conventional level seemed so sick and had all these things, being able to see Aryatara right in front of you when you think about Rinpoche. Really, how many White Tara initiations he gave us. He was so kind to give us. And then he actually met with White Tara and wrote down that he met with White Tara 6 months before he passed away. I think to the day. 6th he passed away. It was September 6th that he wrote it down. He passed March 6th. He said White Tara came and he described her to me standing in front of him. Called me down to describe this to me and to get his diary to write it in. We can become like that. We'll have those realizations. Don't feel like, Rinpoche he's special. I can't be like that. Rinpoche would say, shame on you. You aren't listening to Lama Tsongkhapa. You aren't listening to Lord Maitreya, who says in the Uttara Tantra that we have a treasure in us, like a treasure buried under a house. The poor people don't know is there. They just have to unbury. We have this treasure in us, Maitreya says. Don't ever think we don't have that treasure. Don't say you can't become someone who meets with Aryatara, meets with and has the final stages of the completion stage of highest yoga tantra and crosses that 10th bodhisattva ground into Buddhahood. Don't think you won't, because you're then saying Buddha's lying if you believe you're not that being. So incredible. Now let's read Lama Tsongkhapa has to say about this. I bet it sounds like the third Dalai Lama. Obviously, third Dalai Lama is making commentary on the Lam Rim, right? The first Dalai Lama is Lama Tsongkhapa's student, and then the lineage starts of the Dalai Lamas, and then third Dalai Lama writes the Essence of Refined Gold. It says, if you do not strive to contemplate the demerits of the truth of suffering. So every time we do the meditation before class, it probably gets boring about all the different types of suffering. We do that because if you don't, a genuine wish for liberation will not arise. What's a genuine wish for liberation? That's a desire to emerge from cyclic existence. So you can't get renunciation if you don't know samsara's failings really, really well. If you don't get renunciation, you can't get bodhicitta. Renunciation is the foundation from which bodhicitta grows. Remember when we looked at Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning, perfection, parshin chittun? We saw this. We saw that in Namkha Pel's Lojung Nimi mind training like the rays of the sun, it says, okay, now you have renunciation. Now you can start to get bodhicitta. So we see that if you don't have a genuine wish for liberation, you can't get bodhicitta. You can't even get an abiding nirvana without renunciation. And if you don't know what samsara is, if you don't identify the truth of suffering, you will not be able to want out. If you do not contemplate the cause of suffering, the door to samsara, knowledge of cutting the root of samsara will not arise. So if you don't look at what causes the result, if you don't look at what causes suffering to occur, if you can't figure out that it's the grasping at I and phenomena as being truly established, that misperceives things incorrectly, that causes the truth of suffering, then knowledge of cutting the root of, it says, if you do not contemplate the cause of suffering, the door of samsara, what's the cause of suffering? Grasping at I and phenomena as being truly established. If you don't contemplate the cause of suffering, knowledge of cutting the root of samsara won't arise. So knowledge of paths. How do you cut the root of cyclic existence? This is the superior truth of suffering. Lam Papi Demba O. Right? The superior truth of suffering. So you won't, if you don't contemplate what causes suffering, you won't figure out how to get rid of what causes suffering to be able to achieve the Gupa Papi Demba Ho, the cessation of suffering. It's so clear, right? Lama Tsongkhapa, these people, as Geshe Dorje Damdu say, spoon feed us with this information. And you really, really will recognize it if you start to talk to others who weren't spoon-fed, who study the Dharma. We're so fortunate, really. Generating renunciation characterized by a feeling of despondency towards samsara, as well as having knowledge of what binds you to samsara is imperative. I, the yogi, have practiced in this way. You too seeking liberation to do the same. And this is from the Lamrim Dudun, the abbreviated stages of the path to enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa. So we see everybody's talking about the same thing when we get to this medium scope. That's enough out of me for this evening. I'm sorry, anyone who's on the other applications, on TikTok or on Facebook, I don't have the comments on to be able to answer questions. But please, I say this all of the time. All you have to do is DM me. I will go on live on Zoom with you if you want to talk about Dharma and you have questions, or go on Facebook on TikTok Live if you want and just answer questions. But just be serious. I don't want to play around. I'm not interested in playing around. I played around a lot of my life, and I'm disinterested in that. I'm interested in a solution to the origin of suffering and a solution that causes Buddhahood, that solution has a ripening path of bodhicitta too. So that's enough out of that. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, there is no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Inspired by... Here, hold on. We don't have a lot of time. So I will release you. Let's make a concluding mandala offering as a thank you for the teaching, but all the way back. Let's think about the lineage. Let's think about how this teaching got here. I was speaking with one of the students in the Alanda Master's course who has some similar teachers, and I was saying, think about how we get this nectar. Yes, we have Khenser Geshe Wandak and Geshe Lobsang Gompo and the previous abbot, Ken Rinpoche Gen Gyatso. So fortunate to have had these holy beings. And now Geshe Dorje Damdu, Geshe Aga, Umzala Geshe Aga, and now Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladrin. But think about their teachers. Think about those holy beings. Think about Trijung Rinpoche and Ling Rinpoche and Zong Rinpoche. We're connected to all these beings, and Gen Lachap and Gen Uzir. All these holy beings. Think about all of them. Don't leave them out. And then we go to all these pandits that we're so connected to. You know, we're so fortunate. And then we have these, great masters of Rinpoche's generation in the world now. Genpo Drapa Rinpoche in his 90s is still here. He was so kind. He took a picture with Lori. Lori's Aga brought Lori's picture, and Genpo Drapa took a picture and blessed her for her illness. One of the highest beings, bodhisattvas, to walk the planet. Was so kind to us because of Rinpoche's kindness. I would have never gotten to that high lama without Khenser Rinpoche's kindness. So fortunate. Khenser Pema Jetson. We're so fortunate. Shakar Gen Nima. And their reincarnations are now in the world. And Shakar Gen Nima's reincarnation, Shakar Khenser Rinpoche, is going for his Larampa Geshe, and he is such a good debater, I'm hearing. We're so fortunate. Think about this lineage that goes back, and then goes back from Trijung and Ling Rinpoche, and then to Pabongkha Rinpoche and Dapo Rinpoche, and we see the 13th Dalai Lama and all the Dalai Lamas, and really, 7th Dalai Lama and the 3rd Dalai Lama, 1st Dalai Lama, Panchen Sonan Drapa, Jelsop, Kirchhoff. We are connected to all of these beings, all of them. All of these holy beings, to Padmasambhava and Sakya Kunga Nimpo, and all of these beings, the Karmapas and the Ruby Dorje, all these beings we're connected to. And Buddha Shakyamuni we land on. But all of these holy beings that we talk about are our brothers and sisters in the Dharma. So when I say these names, they're not just blah. These are these beings that are our brothers and sisters. These Arya beings that the Sangha, the real Sangha, not the fake Western Sangha, the real Sangha, those Arya beings that see in emptiness and above, the Arya Bodhisattvas, the Arya hearers, solitary realizers, and Arya, those Buddhas who can take us by the hand. We're so fortunate. They're our brothers and sisters. They're our kind guides. They love us more than we've ever loved. They have more compassion for us than we've ever had, for anything or anyone. And they are right here for us to call to. And because they're all fully ripened, they can emanate and help us. Even bodhisattvas on high levels can emanate. We're so fortunate. So now, thinking about that, offer those beings a perfect universe. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I've made in this teaching, I confess wholly, and may the mantra I recite purify anything that I've said wrong from my side and purify your ears. And make sure that anything that I've said wrong doesn't make its way into your daily practice. So Om Benza Sato Samaya Manubalaya Benza Sato Zeno Badita Dita Me Baba Sutokaya Me Baba Subokaya Me Baba Anarada Me Baba Savazidi Me Bracha Savagama Suju Me Kitam Chiam Kuru Hum Ha Bhagavan Sava Data Kata Benza Mame Monka Benza Bava Maha Samaya Sapa Ahom Ve. May we always, because Rinpoche said Palden Lama is our protector, may we all always be protected by Palden Lama in all of our lives. Jo Ramo, Jojo Ramo, Tunjo Galarajamo, Ramo Jadaja Tunjo, Rulu Hung Jo Ramo, Jojo Ramo, Tunjo Galarajamo, Ramo Jadaja Tunjo, Rulu Jo Ramo, Jojo Ramo, Tunjo Galarajamo, Ramo Jadaja Tunjo, Rulu Jo Ramo, Jojo Ramo, Tunjo Galarajamo, Ramo Jadaja Tunjo, Rulu Jo Ramo, Jojo Ramo, Tunjo Galarajamo, Ramo Jadaja Tunjo, Rulu Jo Ramo, Jojo Ramo, Tunjo Galarajamo, Ramo Vajadaja Dunjo, Ruro Hunjo, Jo Ramo Jojo Ramo Dunjo, Galarajemo, Ramo Vajadaja Dunjo, Rulu Hunjo. May Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings always flourish and always be in the world until samsara is end. Mime zewe tochen genrezi, dreme chembe wambo jambe yan, tipo male junzi zawe dan, ganchen kipi suchen Tsongkhapa, lozandra bijala zowa de. May we always see the root guru. May we always see Khensur Geshe Wandak as inseparable from the Yidam, Aryatara. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara. Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. Gangri Rawe Gorwe Shinyandi Vendande Wa Malu Jongwe Ne Genezi Wan Tenzin Yazoi Shabezi De Badu Enjoy. In all of our lives, may we never be separated from Khensur Geshe Wandak. May we meet with him or her in whatever way he or she chooses to show us. May we accumulate all the virtue that is necessary to always meet with Khensur Geshe Wandak, whether he's emanating in the normal worlds or when we become Arya Bodhisattvas. May we meet with the Sambhogakaya in that pure place. And may Khensur Rinpoche teach us. And when we achieve the state of Buddhahood, may we help Khensur Geshe Wandak in whatever form he or she is in whatever form we need to be in, lead all sentient beings to the state of complete Buddhahood. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, I feel so close to Rinpoche when I see all of your names. And when I see these words, I feel like I just hear Rinpoche, because I was always saying the English words when Rinpoche was talking. So when I'm teaching, it's almost like I'm translating if I close my eyes. And I'm not saying anything new. So it feels very, very, very connected and close. So thank you. I appreciate all of you. Thanks. We'll see you next time, as long as we're not dead.